The next practice area is building a business case for a software product line. And building a business case in general, whether it's for a software product line or not, has to deal with things like what are the business prospects for creating this particular product, or in a product line, this particular line of product. Can we actually make money from this? What benefits is it going to bring to the organization, either in terms of revenue or cost savings or cost avoidance? What are the risks? And how do we quantify the business gains that we get from this? So the business case, and some of these items here come from a paper written by Watts Humphrey that wasn't directly dealing with building a business case, but in this I think it was for justifying a process improvement approach, but the guidance is still applicable. Figuring out what to do in terms of creating a line of products, for example, estimating the costs and the benefits, coming up with a proposal like an adoption plan for how you're going to succeed, and getting the go-ahead from somebody who controls the money to go start spending money on creating a core asset base. So the business case analysis that you do may tell you either, yes, we should be going after product lines, there is a credible business case, or no, we really aren't ready to take on software product lines at this point in time. There's just no business justification for it. It will also help you determine whether or not any proposed customer project should be built as a member of the product line. So there's a business justification associated with going into product lines in the first place, and then there's a business justification associated with whether or not any particular customer product development effort should be done as a member of the product line or outside of the product line. Here's a representation of that chart I showed earlier that has the core asset development effort and the product line development effort, or the overall product line development effort broken out. So you have costs associated with the core asset development, you have costs associated with developing the products from those core assets, and in this example here, there is a cumulative cost associated with creating these three products the old way, and beyond the third product, it becomes more cost effective to develop these as a product line. You'll notice that the asset development line here is not something that stays horizontal from the beginning. So you make an investment in the core asset base to get you started, but as the product line evolves, you will likely be adding new assets to the core asset base. You'll be refreshing the technologies that are embodied in the core asset base and refreshing the tool set that supports the asset base. So it's not a fixed one-time cost that persists over the product, but if you've done your homework, then you should be able to make the case for whether or not there's a payoff point beyond which it makes sense to do this as a product line effort. And the business case for the product line itself is another example of a core asset that can be reused and revisited as the product line evolves. For some organizations, the business case is simple. Like for Celsius Tech, we're going to go out of business if we don't change. For most organizations, though, it's not as drastic as that, and so you need to be able to make a business case based on known costs from the past. So if you're not already a product line organization, you should at least be able to estimate the kinds of costs associated with product development and core asset development and come up with some reasonable numbers based on your experience and your historical reservoir of data. And there are some economic models that can help you do this. There's a variant of the COCOMO constructive cost model for product lines that's called COPLIMO or COPLIMO. I'm not sure how they pronounce this. And there's also an economic model from the SEI called SIMPLE, Structured Intuitive Model for Product Line Economics, and I have a feeling that the acronym came before the explanation, because it doesn't exactly trip off the tongue. But the idea behind SIMPLE is that you have a series of functions into which you can plug numbers. And in fact, you can go to the SEI website and visit the SIMPLE page that allows you to plug in numbers into this set of functions that can be combined in various kinds of expressions to tell you whether or not there is a quantified business justification for getting into software product lines. Here is an example of the kinds of expressions you find in the SIMPLE model. So we want to build N products as a product line. If we build them the old way, this expression says that if the cost of the products is roughly the same for the N products, then the total cost is simply a multiple of this. If it's not the case that they are largely the same cost, that there is a difference across the set of N products, then this would be a summation from 1 to N. In the lower expression, you have factored out the organizational cost of becoming a product line organization, whatever that is and however you estimate it. So how much is it going to cost you to become a product line organization gets into what does it cost to train people, how much is it going to cost us to change the organizational structure if necessary. So there may be some guesses here, depending on the kind of historical information that you have that would refine this estimate. In the CAB function, this is the cost of setting up a core asset base and creating a set of reusable artifacts. These costs are factored out of the recurring costs of product development. So to create the end products in a product line, there's a combination of the cost for the unique product-specific components and the recurring cost of taking something from the core asset base and incorporating it into product development. So obviously, this is just a model, and it's only as good as the numbers that you plug into it. But it does give you a quick way of doing a comparison between the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things in a product line, where some of these significant upfront costs are factored out initially and not distributed across the entire product line effort. But you will have to look carefully at the numbers coming out of this model and deciding, first of all, if what went into the model is realistic enough to produce answers that will give you an indication of a business justification or not for a product line. And secondly, look at whether or not your management expectations about the time frame and the number of products necessary to recover that initial cost and investment is something that is supported by these numbers, or if these numbers are going to produce a story that says clearly we are not ready to become a product line organization because we cannot get any business benefit out of it. So these models are an attempt to quantify the business justification. And going back to that earlier graph I showed you, here is an overlay of just two of the expressions of the SIMPLE model. When you go to the website, you'll see that there's a whole range of expressions for different organizational contexts that you can plug in and use in this model.
The product catalog, have we got any validation of the use of SIMPLE and how the numbers stack up, or is that?
Not in the catalog so far. A couple of our customers are using the SIMPLE model, and what we find is they are willing to share the information with us as part of a product line probe, but of course product line probe results are only for the organization that paid for the probe. So we're trying to get more information by way of numbers out of organizations, but in some cases it's difficult because they view their product line approach and their success in product lines as a competitive advantage. And so they're willing to tell us about, yes, we improved our productivity by a factor of whatever, but they are less willing to share the details of how they accomplished that and how that was measured. Some of the risks in this area are you don't have enough data to be able to do this sort of projections for the future based on the known past, or you have historical data but it's unreliable. The approaches that you take for building a business case may work within a particular business unit in the organization, but when you try to do this across different business units with different kinds of products and different kinds of goals and different organizational structures, the approach that works in one isn't necessarily the approach that's going to work in another, and justifying the product line approach in different business units or across multiple business units simultaneously can become a real challenge. Uncertain market conditions might tell you that maybe now is not the best time to go into a product line approach. Management indecision. So if management is really waffling about this and they're treating a product line approach as, well, we're going to start this as an R&D project, that's a proof of concept, and then we'll see how that goes, and then we'll make a decision later on. So we'll give you a small amount of money from our corporate slush fund, and after that we'll reevaluate. That's not exactly a long-term commitment, and they could pull the plug at any point. And finally, if there's a shift in organizational goals that you didn't see coming, and this again gets back to why your product line champion should be at the right level of the organization. We've had some examples of this, not necessarily in a product line context, but in organizations that we know of, like IBM, for example, selling off its laptop division to Lenovo, and Siemens selling off its entire telecoms unit. If you are operating within that part of the organization trying to establish a product line, and you didn't see this big change in organizational goals coming, you would be completely blindsided. So this is why your product line champion needs to be plugged into the high-level decision makers.
On business case calculation, you don't need to go back necessarily. For military organizations, labor cost, dollar cost, is not so much, if you're doing organic work, is not necessarily a cost because it's a centralized labor pool. So would we be looking at effort?
You could be looking at effort, staffing, or cost avoidance.
Cost avoidance.
Things like that, yeah. And they also justify it more in terms of mission need rather than business or market. So there are various ways of translating a justification for the effort, other than just pure cost. Some of the references for this, and again, I won't spend a lot of time on these discussion items, except for the second one there, the relationship between the scope and the business case. So you may have some people in the organization devoted to coming up with an initial scope for a product line based on interviews with domain experts and based on their engineering skills and their knowledge of the technical feasibility of a proposed set of products. But at some point, that work is going to have to connect with work that looks at the business justification for the proposed set of products. So you can start one or the other first, you can start both in parallel, but ultimately they have to come together. And in fact, you also have to bring in the market analysis and the technology forecasting, which is what the build pattern does.